Good evening and welcome to Face to Face. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Niresh Eliyatambi. The status of women and women's representation in politics and other areas of society was quite the thing to talk about before last year's election. It was all the rage. Many promises were made. And then everyone rejoiced when 22 ladies made it into parliament. But since then, we haven't heard a lot of public discourse on women's issues. No doubt the government must be doing a lot behind the scenes, which we will be shown will reach fruition in a short time. We're all expecting. But there needs to be some public discourse. People need to talk about it, discuss it, what's going on. And to discuss all this, we have with us Lihini Fernando, attorney at law, who was well known on our programs prior to the election. And she took a couple of months break and now she's back with us. Good to have you on our show again, Lihini.
Thank you, Dinesh, for having me today. It's a pleasure to be back.
Right. Lihini, it's early days to judge anything, basically, because 2 months is hardly a time to be pointing fingers at anyone. But what strikes me is that there's not a lot that is being spoken about women's rights and women's issues. Everybody is happy. We've got a woman prime minister, and we've got 22 women in parliament. We are expecting with the local government elections, which should come somewhere around April or May, we're expecting then 25% representation in local government bodies. But we're still far, far behind the rest of the civilized world when it comes to women's rights and opportunities, and of course political representation. What are your views on this?
So, Niresh, now, as a person who advocated for women's rights and women's representation in parliament, in decision making at local government authorities, I must say in this parliament having 22 women, I think is a significant achievement which we have to acknowledge. And also to have a woman prime minister in the country, also I think it's a good thing. But at the end of the day, it is also not about the numbers. It is also about seeing what these 22 women will deliver. Now, what we know is we have 52% of the country are women. And then there's 25% children also. 25% youth and also the children. So now what the general public is looking for is this 52%, their rights, their needs, their wants, how is it addressed in, and also it's not just about talking, but it's about action. Now, yes, there's a new government, but this new government, I would say, is people expect a difference, not just basic difference, but remarkable difference. Now, people wanted a system change, people rejected the establishment, and we can say it is an anti-establishment vote. And also, if you look at from the government's perspective, they gave expectations, not just normal expectations, but extraordinary expectations. So now it is for the government to deliver. So even when it comes to the rights of women, they have to deliver. Now I have this document with me, which is the Gazette, which they have gazetted. Now in this they have highlighted 22 subject areas as functions of the women's ministry and also the laws. Now these are the objectives and the subjects and the functions. So they must make sure that these factors are delivered. Now it is not just about these policies. They need to delve into deep research and go deep into it and come up with action plans. So I mean, if you see the 22 women out there, they must come up and they must also speak about it. Now what we know is now if you take the women workforce in this country, it's only about 30 to 35%. Now what are they doing to increase that? So now there are corresponding legislatures that must be passed with that. Now will that be presented in parliament? Now also you take throughout the years the budgets that were allocated for the women's ministry and child affairs. It was not significant. It was basically, here the budgets was about, tweaking the numbers here and there, and majority of the budget is for recurrent expenditure, that is basically paying the salaries, managing day-to-day operations. And you see piecemeal strategies implemented from different governments to government, like pregnant mothers, they will allocate some money, then also domestic care work, they will allocate some, shelter homes, they will allocate some money. But it's not that. There needs to be a concentrated strategy. Now that is what this government must do. That is what they promised.
So it's not just about having the laws, it's not just about having plans on paper.
Exactly.
But it has to be implemented. As you said, 52% of our population are women, and I think over 60% of graduates now are women.
Yeah.
But there's no point graduating 60% if they don't have the opportunity, and they end up staying at home.
Yeah,
basically.
So they have to. So now there's women. How the women will be brought into the economy? What are the opportunities that are being given when it comes to women empowerment? Then also employment. How will you increase the numbers? Then also safety. Safety is a huge issue. Then also when it comes to abuse. Now is the legal system, the robustness of the legal system in addressing this Domestic Violence Act. Then we're not having shelter care homes. I saw that ministry had passed a budget of 25 million for shelter homes, which is basically
ridiculous.
That is negligible. So, these kind of things. And there's also, we are in an economic crunch, and then there is issues relating to the child, malnutrition, nutritional issues. Then if you take women, you have the estate woman, then you have the apparel woman, then the women who migrate to bring dollars to the country. So there are different segments. Now, the ministry must address these issues. Now, what we see is it's no point, talking about it, but there must be strategies that they come and talk about. It's just not about, presenting the budget and, making those speeches in parliament alone. But, and also now we had the Women's Empowerment Bill, which was passed last year. Now that particular bill, where is the post-legislative scrutiny? I know we don't have post-legislative scrutiny in this country, but that bill must transcend into action. Where are the regulations that are stemming from it? So there is Women's Commission that must be established, and the bill also talks about a fund for women. So no, these are the concerns that, the ministry of the minister must talk about. As you said, yes, they are just 2 months into government and you must give them time. So let's see whether they will work on it.
But also, this is not just something for the Ministry of Women's Affairs, is it? If you're talking about women's representation in the labor force, then it has to obviously involve the Ministry of Labor and other ministries which are involved in creating employment opportunities for the entire population.
Yes.
So this is where in past governments all this fell down, because each minister would be very territorial.
Exactly.
And they would not cooperate with the other ministries. But what we expect from this government is that there would be such cooperation, and that it would be interministerial.
Yeah. So I would say this particular government, they have 159 in parliament, unprecedented level of power that they have received, and also there is a president. Everything is given to them. Now it's a matter of delivering. So they will not have bottlenecks that the previous governments had, like where the president is of one party, that issues will no longer arise. So it is up to them, the Ministry of Social Empowerment, the Ministry of Labor, then the Finance Minister, then all of these people to get together and develop that strategy to and deliver the results. So let's see whether that happens. But to this date, if you really see, we saw certain female MPs in parliament in their opening speeches talking about the rights of women, but apart from that, we have not seen anything.
Now, when you look at, we've got a woman prime minister, and much has been made of this. She's highly visible on social media and so on, and she makes a lot of great speeches. All that is fine, but that has to correlate to the situation of women in general.
Exactly.
It's no point having a woman prime minister and 22 woman female MPs if that doesn't actually mean anything on the ground for the average woman.
See, I'm a strong advocate for women's representation, because if we are a majority of the population, we need to be heard, and that we adequate representation is important. So having a female prime minister, I think, is a significant thing in the country. But then with that, there's enormous responsibility that comes on her, that she has to lift the bar, she has to set the benchmark, so that she has to deliver in such a way so that people will have more confidence in women leaders, and people will want more women leaders to be elected. So it is the responsibility of the prime minister not just to deliver, but to deliver par excellence, and also to these 22 MPs that are sitting in the parliament. They represent all women who raises a voice for women leadership. I mean, there are many who are outside, who ran, but who could not get into that particular place. So it's not just about tokenistic representation. They must understand it's not just tokenistic representation, that they themselves must make sure that at the next parliament, people will make more women come in. We, at least out of the 225, we need more 50, 75 women coming in. All that depends on this particular 22 women, how they deliver. So it is important. It is not just a representation per se, but to lift the bar up.
Well, 22 out of 225 really isn't much. It's less than 10%. Of course, the earlier parliament, I think, had less than 5%. So everybody is quite relieved that this has doubled.
Yes.
But when you have 52% women in the population, obviously this is nothing much. So, as you said,
yeah, so but that's it. These women, they have a responsibility, and I think what this government always said is give them the mandate. They want to clean the system. We have cleaned the system. They wanted educated people. Whether they educate, I mean, it's questionable. We saw what happened with the speaker scenario, when them promising education versus whether they actually have it. It's up to the people. I mean people are the ones who appointed them. So so we hope that they will deliver. But then these 22 women, as I said earlier, they have to deliver, and they have brought in the difference. So it's not just about speaking. And I see one of the other things I see is we see a lot of criticism. They still criticize the previous actions. But then it's no longer that. They are in government, but do they act like the government is also a question. Now that's a question that I see, because they are no longer in the opposition to be accusing. But
so
it is
you
about,
think they're still transitioning?
I think we seriously see the blame game coming out way stronger than we expected. So I mean, they must understand that they are not on the opposition, but they are now in the government. So it is about talking what they will deliver, how they will deliver. People want to see action plans. Now with the next budget, what are the budgetary allocations? What is the justification for these budgetary allocations? How that will transcend into action. Now also, and technology, we're in 2024, how they will bring in, bringing that technological drive, the change that you want to see. And it's not the conventional way of delivery, but what is how will they do it differently? Now this is what the people are expecting. And it's not just about piecemeal changes, but overhaul changes. I'm again talking, Niresh, on what they said at campaign stages. Now, they painted a very larger than life picture. Now, we in the opposition saw that some of the statements that they made were not practical. Now, if you really look at it, now this whole DSA, they said that they will amend it. Then also when it comes to food prices, cost of living, they said that they will bring it down drastically. And then when it comes to, MPs not taking houses to, not using vehicles, they said so many things on campaign stages. But we in the opposition, we saw that whatever they were saying was not practical. And we did also say it to the general public in our campaign stages, but then people didn't listen. People believed in them and they painted that larger life picture, so they have to deliver. So the bar they have raised is here. So their delivery point is here. Now they can't come back and say, look, we have these reasons and all that. So the other question I have is, when they made, again it's politics, when they made these promises, did they just say it on stage, or did they not do their research, not understand, or did they hoodwink the people? So these are questions, but again, I don't want to go on criticizing the government. As you said, it's 2 months, so let's give them the benefit of the doubt to deliver. But and hope they will not fail by the people, because at the end of the day, Nilesh, this is a country, this is our country, and we need whoever the government, they must deliver for the people. And it is, you must do justice by the people, because you cannot repeatedly have governments that are failing and failing, because it's not just about power, it's just also about, failing by the people, failing the people's mandate. Because,
so one of the things, now you kept mentioning system change, and with Sri Lanka's economy having hit rock bottom and society pretty much breaking down a couple of years ago, it was actually, it was and is time for an entire overhaul, an entire system change, and the general public actually voted for that, and that's what the general public requires and desires. Of course, it's easier for the general public, the voters, to say, let's go ahead and change it, but if the changes also affect them, and if the public has to change, then it becomes a little more difficult. You have to sort of convince them. So the behavior of, for example, our society doesn't behave very well towards women. But how do you get society to change? You can have all the laws in the world, but it's the implementation.
Exactly.
So how do you
it's like this now.
done?
Let's talk a bit about this whole Clean Sri Lanka initiative that they brought in. Now, I'm sure they brought it with a good intention, but then did they set footing on the right way? Like, we saw certain things that they did initially about, these buses and trishaws and all those things, and there was, which is a good thing, but how did the people see it? So again, change is required, system change is required, so it is also about laws and everything that, and also people also changing. So the government has a much wider responsibility to convince the people as well, and to make sure that the people also align with it. But then again, Nilesh, what the government fails to understand is, as I said, it's not about talking, it's about delivering. Now, for example, our country, before the election, they painted a picture saying that, there was a 76-year curse, and that, previously nobody has done anything to this country. And it's like, the whole establishment was rejected. So it is also a lot to do with their emotional campaigning and how they went about with it. To me personally, I would say they painted a very bad picture about all the leaders in this country, which was not the truth. So now they must deliver on what they said, whether it's women, children, the economy, the technology, the transportation, whether it's industry. Overall, they must deliver.
But again, it's not just about the politicians trying to deliver or the public changing their views, but how do you get the bureaucracy to change, because they are set in their ways more than any other segment in society. They are set in their ways. I mean, you can get a farmer to change the way that he grows things, right? You can even ask him to grow something else rather than the vegetables he's growing. But when you ask civil servants, all these people in state-owned enterprises, in government departments, in Pradeshya Sabhas, when you ask them to do something differently,
they don't cooperate.
Very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So this isn't that the ultimate challenge?
See, they can't, I would say again, there's the government administration also. So the bottlenecks, the red tape, they have to work bypassing that, all that. So I mean, when they came to power, they obviously knew the government system and how the government system operates. So right now coming and saying this government system, the state individuals, the representatives, the state officials are not listening to what they are saying. We see many ministers in parliament making statements of this nature. I saw one minister saying that when he came, he didn't know that so many number of passports were approved. I mean, I don't want to mention names. So I mean, making statements of that nature is not acceptable. So I remember in campaign stages, we very well saying that, these people do not have the experience to deliver. That's one thing we said. Then we also said that they don't have the team to deliver. So now it's a question from the things that they are saying, do they have the experience to deliver and do they really have the team? So now coming and giving various excuses is not the solution. It's about, driving the vehicle. So President has a responsibility, so is the Prime Minister, and so is the 159 MPs. So I mean, they have to do justice by the people. And again, I come back, even when it comes to women and children, they must ensure that the rights of the women are secured, that women have safer environments to function, do their work, and children's rights, that and all these regulations and all of that are implemented. I think this is not a time to give excuses. This is a time to deliver.
But let's take a practical example. Out in not just the village areas, but even the urban and semi-urban areas, street lighting in Sri Lanka is abysmal. I mean, you get it on the main roads, certainly, but apart from that, neighborhoods are generally half in darkness.
Yeah.
Now, this directly affects the status of women, because women simply can't work late at all. Work late meaning even if they are walking home at 7:30 in the night, when the sun has set, then they are at risk. Now, obviously, if the Pradeshya Sabhas are told, make sure that there is sufficient lighting, because it is an issue for the women in the area, would they actually carry it out? Would they actually take it in that spirit? Because now street lighting is a bit of a political weapon in Sri Lanka, where if an important person lives down that particular street, the lighting is perfect. Or if there is some function where a politician is going, or a religious institution is having some kind of church feast or perahara or something, then the lights are replaced and everything comes on. So it is very much a political weapon. How do you get the people in the Pradeshya Sabha to change their ways?
So I remember when we were back in the day in the council, we used to say very clearly that
that's the Moratuwa Urban
Council. So we used to say, I've spoken many a time saying, implementation. It's not about the political party or who it is. It is about the people. If the people are paying your assessment rates and assessment taxes, it is a duty of the government and the officials and also the MPs there to ensure that the roles and responsibilities of the council happen. So I think we have advocated for this at many a times, and this particular people also voted for this particular government, hoping that these old systems will no longer happen. So now it is up to them, the government, also to ensure. Now they have the commissioners around the country to ensure that the implementation is not politicized. Now depoliticization of state institutions, depoliticization of functions is very important. Now it is, and also if you take about budgetary allocations, now we know back in the day, MPs, there are allocations that the MPs get for a year. There's a certain amount, I think 10 million were given to each an MP. So then, they used to decide what are the area related projects that they will be doing, who the money will be dispersed to now. And then if you refer it back, this particular monies, have they been utilized for the benefit of the people in totality, or is it just for a certain group of people that these services were delivered? Now, one of the main accusations that came about was, you MPs serve only their constituents. They do not service the entire public at large. Now, these were reasons that, issues that we had, like for example, to get your road tarred, then you get to get your drains done. They were difficult tasks because you need to have some political connection, or you need to know some Pradesh Sabha Mantri to get it done. Now, this is the system change that people want. So now this particular government must address these concerns. Now, what we know is, here we had a 3-tier government system in Sri Lanka: the central government, the provincial council, and the local councils. So sometimes back in the day, what we saw during Yahapalana time, the government was the Yahapalana government, but then the local councils were the SLPP. So we saw the bottleneck at that point. Now, right now, if you take the present situation, the government and also the local councils, which are managed by the commissioners, are all part of the government. So even right now, implementation and strategy can happen, but we do not see that happening. Even how the funds being dispersed down, the verticals, there are no hindrances. But right now, what we see is this particular government, we don't see any strategy, we don't see effective change. Now, yes, you can say there are 2 months in government, but certain little changes, the way you work, in terms of cleaning, to that attitudinal change, those things also can happen. It's not about passing, as I said, it's not about giving excuses or saying it's not that. I have a question: does the government still feel that they are in government, or are they thinking that they are in the opposition? Because if you take roads cleaning, drains cleaning, those things through the commissioners can happen. But I think from what they promise to what they are delivering, there's a huge gap. Take the whole corruption factor. Now, what they promised, they acted as if when they come to power, they will bring everybody and culprits and put them in. Now, we understand that there's a system to do it, but that's not how they said. But in terms of stolen asset recovery initiative, now what they bringing that bill? And then there were certain scams that they spoke about. Now, where are the investigations? Now, I saw before elections, they showed so many files, that they have so much of corruption-related files in their possession. To this date, what are the measures that they have taken? Have they started filing? So they can say, okay, we are just 2 months, we are working on it. No, but they have to deliver, because that is what they promised.
So high expectations indeed, which the government did set for themselves, and the people expect them to deliver. We are going in for a short commercial break, and we'll be right back, so don't go away.
මේ වසන්තේ මේ ආරාධනය විසේකාර දඟකාර හැඩකාර කුමාරයන්ට සහ කෝල කොමල මනලෝල කුමාරයන්ටයි මේ වසන්තේ සිරස වසන්ත කුමරා සහ කුමරිය ලෙස කිරුළු පළඳින්න දැන්ම සැරසෙන්න පහසින්නවිත් මුමුණා ගියා වයස අවුරුදු 18ත් 25ත් අතර කුමාරයන් සහ කුමාරියන් මෑතකදිගත් ඡායාරූපයක් සමග දෙමරවාරි 20 වෙනිදාට පෙර අයදුම් කරන්න. ලිපිනය නිෂ්පාදක සිරස වසන්ත කුමරා සහ කුමරිය, ස්ටයින් ස්ටුඩියෝ, බොරුපන පාර, රත්මලාන. පිවිසෙන්න අවුරුදු.sirsatv.lk.
ගොල්ලන්ට මේ අපිට කියන්න බෑනේ මේ අනේ හාල් ටික හොයලා දෙන්න කියලා.
අහන ප්‍රශ්නේ තමයි උත්තර දෙන්න ඔබතුමාත් අහපු ප්‍රශ්නෙට. ඌ බලාපොරොත්තු කන්දක් දීලානේ ඇවිල්ලා තියෙන්නේ.
සදාකාලිකව ඔයගොල්ලන්ට කොරාය කිඹුල්ලු බල ඉන්න පුළුවන්.
ජනතාව බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන අත් වශයෙන්ම ශනික යම්කී සහනයක්.
දැනට තියෙන රජයයි ඒ තිබිච්ච රජයන අතර අහසට පොළොව වගේ වෙනසක් තියෙනවා.
මොකද අපි දැක්ක මීට පෙරත් ඔය ජවනිකාව අපි දැක්ක ඔය නාට්‍ය අපි දැක්කා. කලබල වෙන්න එපා රොෂාන්, අපි ඔය වගේ ප්‍රශ්න කරන්න ආචාර්ය උපාධි සහතික නැතුණා කියලා කියන්න පුළුවන්.
අත එක පැහැදිලි කිරීමක් කරන්න වස්ස ඔබට තීරණය කරන්න පුළුවන්.
අපි හැමෝම එකතු වෙලා මේ රට හදමු.
දවස සතිය දිනවල සවස 6:30ට.
Welcome back to Face to Face. We are in conversation with Lihini Fernando, attorney at law and former member of the Moratuwa Municipal Council. And now, Lihini, you were a municipal councillor at a time when it was heavily male dominated and so on. Now we are going to have local government elections in a few months' time. April, possibly May, but very soon. Now there is a requirement that 25% of the council seats must be reserved for women. It's the law. What do you think will happen? Will that be followed through? Or will political parties say we don't have even enough women to nominate? What's going to happen? Because there is no requirement for political parties in their nomination list to have a percentage of women, is there?
It is. Now they're not just about women. About the youth, they brought in 18 to 35. The youth also must be represented. There's a quota for the youth as well as the women. So now there are two things. The candidates that will be running for the wards and as well as a list. Now out of the list, 50% have to be women, and out of the contesting, there 10% have to be women. So there is, and also overall composition, 25% must be women. So you will see out of the 4,000 municipal council member, local council, all members, 25% must be women.
Right.
So that means even in the nominations, you have to give that representation to women. Again, sorry, I made a mistake. There's about 8,000 last time overall in the country that was appointed. So out of that, 25% must be women. I think it is good, Niresh, because as I said, 52%. Our population are women, and women must be represented, and that voice must be given to the women. But it's not just about tokenistic representation. You must allocate necessary budgets, and the government also, if whoever the mayor, whichever party the mayor is, mayor must work in sync with all political parties. And also, I mean, we saw in the previous local council systems where there was a lot of gender discrimination when women were elected. People were saying, look, they don't have experience, they don't know what they are talking about, and they were just put in just to fill in the lists. And what can they deliver? So there was heavy criticism about women, but you can say pass the same criticism about men also. I mean, as much as you're criticizing the woman, you can criticize the man also. What have they delivered? So I think it's not about bringing that gender biasness, but it's about getting together and working for the community. So I think having that 25% representation, I think far more than 25% is required.
But what will it actually do on the ground in the sense now in the local councils? Will it actually serve to bring women's issues to the fore?
Yes. So now in the council, there are committees. Now there are committees relating to health. Then there are different committees relating to the environmental related issues, then development, then sustainability. So across and then there are committees relating to women and children. So these committees can do activities for the betterment of women. So for example, establishing daycare centers, then preschool centers. Now in Sri Lanka, to this date, there are no regulations relating to daycare. There are no regulations relating to preschools, then things like early childhood education. Now I saw the government in their budget also one of the priorities they have said is regulating child care centers, and also so these kind of activities which they have mentioned now, revising laws relating to oppressed women and children. So there are so many activities that they have listed. So these factors can be addressed through the local council. So local councils, though they are not lawmaking authorities, but they are the direct institution that gets directly linked with the people. So implementation can happen very effectively at the local council level. But the thing is, now if you take local councils, the budgets, there are no central government budget allocations, so the earnings are from the assessment rates, and also then stamp duty allocations that come from the central government, and provincial government is the allocation. That's how you get the allocations, but the councils have the provision of doing their own related projects and sourcing their funding. So I think instead of looking at the conventional way of operating, they need to look at it beyond that to serve the people, especially relating to these women, children, disabled community, marginalized community, oppressed communities. Those things can be addressed. So it's, I think, no longer it is about, making sure that your garbage is collected or, street lights are put, drains are clean. The functions of it must be beyond that, I would say.
But are we likely to see that this time? Because obviously, now again, the conventional wisdom is that the NPP will end up winning a lot of these bodies. It remains to be seen, of course. And you, of course, are a member of an opposition party, so you would be hoping that your party would win quite a number of those.
So if you look at the cooperative elections that are happening these days, we see a reversal in the sentiments of the reversal. So though the tide went towards the NPP in the general election, I doubt the same will happen at the local council level, because local council, it's about who were with the people, who is with the people. Now if you take our ground level network, our people, our MPs, our members are with the people, so that matters. Who it's about that people's touch. So I think and also now this government, though it's 2 months, have they delivered what they said? So people will also look into these factors to see should the local councils also be given. I think too much power is also not good.
Well, you're absolutely right. And if we do have some close run elections, wouldn't that be just the ideal thing? Because then you will have both the opposition and perhaps not just two parties, but you would have a ruling party in a particular local government body. You would have maybe several opposition parties. So wouldn't that be
required?
Good for democracy and good for service to the people.
So the people must put this government on check as well. Now it's not about giving blanket power, but you need to see who is actually running for elections, who are your representatives. Now okay, people got a chance to express their frustration and go against the establishment. Now I think it is time for them to look at the people, understand what they will bring to the table, whether they can actually deliver. I think the voter also has a responsibility not to be very emotional in their decision making, but to understand the policies that are presented by the political parties. Now what we see is this particular NPP government, now yes, they put out a manifesto. And in our campaigns, we clearly said some of the manifestos, some of the promises that they were saying was not practical. And then on the other hand, if you take SJB, we presented, I would say, a very comprehensive manifesto, including our blueprint. But I don't think people understood, nor did the people read and understand policies and voted. I think, if you are wanting change, the people also must embrace change. Embracing change is about understanding policy and also understanding who the people are. So, this particular local government, I think it is important, to not be emotional and, understand political rhetorics and stories, but, who presents the best team for your area. And it's also about, now it is important that more youth come forward. I mean, it's not just about, being keyboard warriors and voicing their opinion on social media. It's also about coming forward and representing the people. And, that change will come if people are also willing to change. And that change must be driven by getting the right people into the decision-making places. So it is important that, the youth of this country as well as the women all come forward at the next local council election. So you will see a system change with the representation. Now, for example, one of the criticisms that we, the opposition, have is about, these representatives who are in parliament now, 159 representatives. Yes, you have put heads, but are they the right people? Do they have the experience and the knowledge to deliver? Now we have our doubts, but they, obviously they, on the other hand, bring in a different narrative, but we have the doubts. The people blanketly vote. People just, because they were frustrated about the whole 76 years, they just went and voted without even seeing who they are. Now, even to this state, we don't know who your MP is from the area. Do we even know the names? At least out of the 159, can you even name 50? These are questions. So I think people of this country also must look at it in a much more deeper manner when it comes to the local council elections, not to just, vote for the sake of voting, because giving too much power to one political party is not good and it's not advisable, because, too much power leads to
abuse of power sometimes. Yes. Interesting thoughts indeed. Now, Lihini, what about the opposition parties? Now, of course, some discussions are supposed to happen between the many opposition parties, but it was nice to see for the sake of democracy, where both the UNP and the SJB did come out with statements saying that they would be having discussions, including with each other, which is something that I think most people in this country desire. I mean, they want a strong opposition.
Yes.
What are your views on this, especially with the local government elections coming up?
Yeah. So what now during the presidential election, Anurag Madhasan got 42%. At that point, also the opposition was far more than the president. But however, when it came to the general election, it took a different tide. But if you really take the right wing in this country now, is the right wing representation is required. Now, though Anurag Dissanayake represented the left wing, they spoke of the right wing policies also. So now to this state, we don't know whether they are the right wing or the left wing, or whether they're Ranilist, I would say, because you see they are implementing what Ms. Ranil Wickremesinghe did back in the day, and you don't see anything new that have been introduced by them. So the narrative, I think, for the right wing is required in this country. The right wing representation of this country is required. So I think, SJB, UNP, we've always stood up for that. We've always spoken the truth for the people, though the people didn't listen. We never did emotional campaigns. All our campaign stages were about policy, what we will deliver with the numbers. But, that is not what the people of this country wanted. But that doesn't mean that the right-wing narrative is no more. The right-wing narrative is present. And if you really look at it, that is the policy that will drive this country forward. Because if you take markets, opening up markets, connecting the country with the globe, then, open market policies, then revamping, restructuring state-owned institutions, all that is required. So these strategies are what we always spoke of. So that is relevant. So it is important that SJB, UNP and the right-wing parties to understand this and, come together and work together so that, that representation is given to the people of this country. So I think, coming together to discuss is a good sign.
Are you hopeful that it will show results?
Yes, I'm hopeful because, this country, not just the government, the country needs the opposition, a solid opposition that talks facts, that talks truth, that talks policy, and talks what actually tells what actually should be delivered, and that is what is best for the country. Now now there's the IMF program, and this particular government, they had severe criticisms of the IMF, whereas we at every point said, no, you have to stick to the IMF policies. Now those must be delivered. So, our narrative is the narrative that will drive this country forward. So it is important that, we drive it and we make the people listen to our narrative.
Now, what about the underlying personality clash between the two leaders of the UNP and the SJB, which after all is what has prevented the two parties from forming some kind of coalition, even if they don't become one party. Politics is all about alliances. Are you hopeful that this personality clash can finally be overcome?
I think it is time that they discuss all that and, come into some kind of an agreement. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to meet halfway. Nobody will get their entire share. So you will have to meet halfway. agree to disagree on policies, and come to a level playing, come to a point where they can work together, because that is required again for the opposition, and also the party that has the party that has to take power next, because we are the only alternative.
Now, getting back to women's issues, what is the sort of roadmap that you would like to see going forward, say for the rest of the year and the next year? What are the concrete steps that would be required?
So the budget is supposed to be presented. I would like to see an allocation, a significant allocation for Women and Child Affairs Ministry in the next budget. And it's not just about allocating budgets, but also implementing and also formulating strategy. Now here it says in their allocations, they said provisions of public service under the purview of ministry in an efficient and people friendly manner. So and also reforming all systems, procedures using modern management techniques and technology. So and implementing women's charter. They are saying 22 points which they have underlined as the subject functions of this particular ministry. And so we would like to see that all these things happening, functioning, and also the rights of the women, the issues being addressed and resolved. And all women in this country, they have a safer environment and to prosper, which is, I think, is the duty of the government to ensure. And also we have a female Prime Minister who understands these issues deeply, and we'd like to see that, a significant interests are being brought forward. And there's a parliamentary women's caucus. They've come together, and women over the years have been able to work irrespective of their political party differences when it comes to issues, to work together. So I think, women's and children's issues, you don't need political color. It's just about, resolving. It's about passing all those necessary legislations and laws and getting things moving forward. And we hope, with this particular budget, that they will focus on this way more effectively.
Right, so that's the budget. But then looking further down the road after the budget, then you have the local government election, the provincial council. Well, what more needs to be done?
And also they also must bring in 25% women quota, and those also must be legalized, not at the parliamentary level, provincial council level, so to increase women representation. And also at the local council level and also at divisional secretariats, you get the women's desk. So those things must start functioning. So, it's enough that we talk about policies, different governments change, policies change, but overall, if they can put up a roadmap in terms of looking at the next 5 to 10 years, in terms of the activities that can be drawn up to ensure that we see progressive results as opposed to, just piecemeal strategies. So I think we'd like to see that change, and also how the private sector also can be involved. And we have so many NGOs in this country working, many work in isolation, but there's not been a central unit to bring everybody to one particular platform. So those things also must happen. Then how can, regulate, bring in more regulations, get the private sector involved to do more projects. Then, the issues like period poverty, then issues like nutrition, sanitary care, all those things, sanitation. Then looking at the lives of the estate woman, migrant woman. Then when women go overseas, what about the children in this country? The aspects related to child care, child abuse, women abuse, then unsafe environment in public transportation, aspects relating to more increase in labor force participation. I can go on. So all these things, I hope they will address.
But it also requires a lot of awareness creation, isn't it?
Yes.
And I wonder, now in previous governments, it was simply, here's the Ministry of Women's Affairs, and the rest of the cabinet doesn't even become aware of these issues, which are, after all, affecting more than 50% of the population. But in the male-dominated cabinets, the women's affairs was sort of something separate on its own. How do you change that culture? And I'm afraid we are almost out of time, so that will be our last question.
So it's not just about the women's minister. There's other many women. There's a whole heap of women in the government. I think all these women must collectively work to ensure that they have a solid action plan and that they deliver, so that they can withstand all the criticisms that will be brought forward by the other gender. So I think, as I earlier said, it's not just about talking, it's about collectively getting together and delivering, so that there is more confidence in women leadership and women representation in politics.
Lihini Fernando, attorney at law and former member of the Moratuwa Municipal Council, thank you very much for joining us this evening. And thank you to you at home for watching. Don't go away, because the news is coming up next. Have a good evening.